What does it mean to do this sustainably? What does it mean to take care of ourselves and invest in ourselves? What does it mean to have a happy, fulfilling life while we are deeply invested in walking a path that makes the world a better place? Hello and welcome to this video. Welcome to my channel. My name is Amy. This is a place where I talk about the very internal aspects of the journey of walking one's purpose, being the change that we want to see in the world. What does that really mean on an embodied level? And importantly, how can we do that kind of work sustainably? I come from a social work background. I come from a lot of social justice, social advocacy, and activism types of environments. And sustainability is a huge issue because burnout is rampant. And I think now more than ever, we're seeing that play out. So in this video, I want to share some things that have been helpful, some new paradigms, some new ways of thinking, some perhaps radical permissions for yourself to consider in this question of how do we show up and sustainably do this work? Those of us who are really mission and vision driven, who have a really strong sense of purpose of I am here to make a positive change in the world. What does it look like to not burn ourselves out? The journey I've been on for the last several years has had me really unlearn and sort of reevaluate a lot of things that I used to think were helping, a lot of things that I used to think were making a positive social change. My own process of internally exploring what is a way that I can do that sustainably, that doesn't leave me constantly or chronically depressed, constantly or chronically anxious, constantly or chronically physically ill in other ways. As I walk this journey of deconstructing and reconstructing my whole self-identity, my whole understanding of what it means to be a human in the world, it has meant that I've had to really question a lot of those old ways of thinking, those old ways of believing that I used to carry. So there are some tough truths with this. We are in a very intense time period. We have been for a while now. That is just ramping up. The wind agrees with me. Especially when there's a war going on, especially when there are images of violence and horrendous information and intense suffering that we know is happening, that is up front in our faces, on social media, in the news, in just our own awarenesses of what's going on in the world. I did a video a while ago, last year I think, about the allostatic load that comes with cumulative trauma experiences. I'm going to link that here if you want to deeper dive into these concepts. It's really fascinating and interesting, but the reason why it's so important is in our understanding that trauma doesn't happen in a silo, that the things that we carry, the traumatic experiences that we've had, the fear especially, that sticks with us. It accumulates. It's not something that just goes away after some time. We can heal it if the environment and conditions are right for healing. But if you take a walk back through time of what we have been through, especially since 2016, but even before then, just on a political context, I think you can understand that the amount of cumulative trauma and stress that we are all collectively carrying in this country, and I want to say globally as well, is astronomical. We have not had time to rest and recover in between these waves of intensity, these periods of intensity. But I just want us to understand that when these seemingly newer things pop up into our awareness, when violence is ramping up in other areas of the world, and suddenly that's something that we're hearing about and learning about in new and different and intense ways, we are experiencing that on top of all the other stressors, on top of all the other stuff that we've already felt, that we've already been exposed to. So when we hear details about wars and violence in other countries, it's sparking, it's going to hit on our own individual wounding and trauma too. If we had childhood experiences of feeling unsafe, it's going to hit on those. It's going to hit on our political trauma from our own country, from watching protests and social justice issues play out on a very public scene these last several years. There's been so many different groups who have been targeted and who have known that they are not safe for whatever reason, for an identity experience that they didn't even choose to have. So the result of this is when we hear this information about something that's happening in reality right now, it activates all of that. It's touching on all of that. It's like drops of water in a bucket. Eventually that bucket fills and it's going to spill over. And the reality is we're not likely to see an end in the amount of intense information, the violence, the war energy, the attacks on marginalized populations. We're not likely to see an end to that in the near future, even in our lifetimes. This means that if we're not mindful, if we're not careful about protecting ourselves and preserving ourselves and sustainably entering these spaces where we're learning about horrific injustices that are happening in the world around us, if we're not doing those things in a way that's sustainable for us, we are going to experience illness. We're going to experience disease. We're going to have mental health conditions. Depression and anxiety are rampant for a reason. That's not accidental. That's a result of the way that we're living right now. When we stay in a chronically activated state, a chronic fight, flight, freeze, fawn state, there's a toll on our nervous system. We can never fully calm down. And that ripples out into all areas of our lives, our relationships, our educational capacity, our intellectual capacity, our focus, how we feel in our bodies, our ability to move through the day-to-day requirements and expectations that are set upon us, even just our ability to take care of ourselves in our physical environment. And the real intense thing about all of this too is that energy is contagious. We are energetic beings, and you feel my energy just the way that I would feel your energy if I was watching your video. And so even if we're not talking about these events to people around us, even if people around us seem kind of oblivious to it, we're all still swirling in that same energy. All of our collective stress, our collective trauma responses are heightened. And especially those of us who are sensitive, which if you're watching my channel, you probably are, we feel it even more. And it can be really hard to internally suss out, like, what's the energy that I'm feeling that doesn't feel so good versus like what's the energy that I'm just, in this collective experience with everybody else. And if fear is really heightened, if judgment is really heightened, if hatred is really heightened, all of those are really intense energies that we can't help but be affected by. Again, even if we're not in spaces where people are saying those things, we're still gonna go to the grocery store, we're still gonna drive our car down the street, we're still gonna walk by people on the sidewalk, and we're gonna pass and feel each other's energy. And if somebody else is in a really low depleted state as a result of engaging in those kinds of spaces, some of that's gonna hit on us too. So my real point here, and this is something that I think is a bit controversial, again, it is an awareness and some radical permission that I have granted myself in order to protect my sustainability and do what I feel I need to do in order to step into my greatest callings and follow my purpose. But it runs counter to a lot of the ways that we are conditioned to think about the social injustices in the world around us, especially in social justice spaces. This is an ongoing conversation. None of this is black and white. It's all very gray. It is all a very precarious balance. Something that's right for one person is not necessarily right for the other person. I want to context all of this with that. So my main point is just that there is messaging within social justice spaces about checking out of certain political or societal or global events. There can be a shame-inducing and a guilt message of, well, the only reason you can ignore that is because of your privilege. And it's true. That's the tricky part of this, is like, that is true. I can choose not to engage with wars that are going on in another country because I have the privilege of not living in that country during a war. If I was living in that country, I could not make that choice. Is it fair that I get to make that choice and other people don't get to make that choice? No. That's where it gets murky. There are kind of two parts to this perspective that I want to offer. The first is that there's a difference between self-protection and burying my head in the sand. Self-protection means I'm aware of what's happening. I maybe have a toe in every once in a while. I maybe like dip in and check out what's happening, but I have boundaries. I'm very limited and conscious of the amount of energy, focus, attention that I'm using to engage with whatever this topic is. It could be anything that is physiologically activating for me. Head in the sand means I'm just ignoring it. I'm pretending like it's not happening. I'm going shopping. I'm like hanging out with my friends. I'm like drinking beers in my backyard, watching football. Like I'm doing all those things like nothing is happening. Head in the sand is different from self-protection. Self-protection is awareness. Self-protection is boundaries. Self-protection is a recognition and a conscious choice of, I see what's happening. I'm not ignoring the human atrocity and the suffering that's happening to these people. And I am consciously and really intentionally choosing, what can I do about that? How do I engage with that? And what can I do about that? So that's the first kind of permission I want to give, is that not showing up every day, not engaging in learning about a topic every day, not being completely open to receiving any kind of information about these horrific injustices that are happening, those are boundaries. That's self-protection. That's not sinking into your privilege. Again, sinking into your privilege is going about life like nothing's happening at all. The second part of this, the second kind of permission that I want to offer, in case it's helpful for you as it has been for me, is the idea of opportunity cost. This is something I learned about in a public administration class I took on, I think, budgeting, and it really stuck with me at the time, and I understand why now because it comes up in situations like this too. Opportunity cost is the recognition that choices we make have underlying consequences that might not be surface level. So I can make a choice between A and B. Opportunity cost looks at, if I choose A, what's the cost of not having chosen B? And if I choose B, what's the cost of not having chosen A? What did I miss out on with either of those two choices by not choosing the other thing? So here's how it applies to this situation. If my choices are to react, engage, call my public officials every single day, be totally invested and involved in this whatever injustice is that's right up in my face right now, what is the missed cost of that choice? Where could my energy be going instead? Could my energy be better spent elsewhere? Would investing my energy in this thing over here instead actually have more of an impact in the long run? That's what opportunity cost invites us to ask and apply for ourselves in thinking about this. I'm going to use myself as a personal example. So I am a very highly sensitive person. I have severe phone anxiety. I do not like engaging with political stuff, especially after having worked in a public interest law firm for several years directly with politicians. That is a triggering area for me. It costs me a lot of energy and a lot of emotional energy in particular to be engaged with things in a political way right now. I'm not saying that's always going to be the case, but that's where I'm at right now. On the other hand, when I funnel my energy into creative projects, when I funnel my energy into different ways of thinking about how do I create the world that I want to be a part of, when I invest in healing myself and healing parts of myself so that I can step up to the level of opportunity that I'm hoping to access, the types of callings that I feel really pulled towards, when I invest my energy in those sorts of ways, it's regenerative for me. I'm not drained, I'm not exhausted, I'm not crashed out on my couch at 3 p.m. unable to do anything else for the rest of the day. That's what I have to consider in an opportunity cost. There's a book I talk about a lot in my videos called Walk Out, Walk On. That book talks about two different groups of people who are involved when a system crumbles. And that's a lot of what we're seeing right now. We're seeing capitalism crumble. We're seeing colonialism crumble. I would argue that the war we're seeing right now is absolutely a component of that. All of these things run deeper. All of these things are interconnected. This is like kind of an aside note now, but I'm sitting here in this forest, and something I think a lot about is not losing sight of the forest for the trees. So not getting so distracted by the tree in front of me that I completely lose sight of everything else around me. It's so easy for that to happen when, again, there are these massive injustices that are just thrown into our face. So anyways, as systems are collapsing, the book Walk Out, Walk On talks about there needing to be two different groups of people. One group of people that sort of perform hospice within the dying systems. So if we think about those as organizations, people who are working within organizations to try and improve the policies and practices of those organizations at the same time as capitalism and colonialism are collapsing. And once capitalism and colonialism collapse, there won't be any organizations like that anymore, hence the hospice aspect. On the other hand, there are groups of people who need to leave the systems in order to create and build something new for people to step into as the old systems die. Now, this is a personal choice, and I see that we need people on all sides. We need people who are within organizations. We need people who are within politics. We need people who do have that energy to call their public officials and sort of jump through those old world hoops in order to try and institute some kind of positive change. We also need people who are on the other side, who are the creators, who are the pathfinders, who are the experimenters, who are leaning into creating something different that people can ultimately step into. I'm definitely on the walkout side. That is my journey. Maybe that's yours as well, and maybe not. Again, this is a very personal choice, and the purpose is that we're all doing something different to address the injustice that's happening. So where can we have the biggest impact? This is what I want us to think about. Where can we have the biggest impact? Very individual choice, very individual decision based on your own past experiences, based on your own particular skills and unique insights and gifts to offer the world. Ultimately, our energy is finite. We don't have infinite energy. Again, especially if you're somebody who's sensitive, somebody who's in the disabled community, we have really limited energy. We have to be really careful and intentional about how we're investing our energy. So this is just what I would invite you to think about. Where do you want your energy to go? What do you want your impact to be? Are you meant to fight against, which is to be very invested in what's happening, the injustices, news, social media, all that? Or do you want your impact to be creating the new? And if so, we have to step back and distance ourselves a bit from that old, especially when it is physiologically activating, when it triggers stuff, when it makes us feel that rage, that emotion, that need to respond. And regardless of which path, we have got to think about what it means to protect ourselves. Superman is not coming to save us. Nobody else is coming to save us. All the work that needs to be done, we have to figure out how to do it ourselves. And if we're all burnt out, if we're all infighting and can't get along, if we're all depressed and anxious and can't get off the couch, we can't do the work that needs to be done. In fact, that's a mechanism of these systems, is to keep us stuck in those kinds of patterns and processes so we don't break out in order to create the new. It might feel better in the short run to be on the front lines and responding and engaging and really heavily investing ourselves in these issue areas. But we have got to think about the long-term costs. We've got to think about the long run. We have got to recognize that this is a long game, not a short game. And we have to keep our eye on the forest. We have got to keep our eye on the forest, not just on the trees that are in front of us. What does it mean to do this sustainably? What does it mean to take care of ourselves and invest in ourselves? What does it mean to have a happy, fulfilling life while we are deeply invested in walking a path that makes the world a better place? So I'm just inviting you to have some self-compassion. I'm inviting you to have a little bit of reflection of your energy allocation. How does it feel to invest your energy in the ways and the areas that you're investing your energy in right now? Is it sustainable for you? If it's not, what would pulling back, stepping back, protecting yourself a bit more look like? What might leaning into the creating new instead of fighting against the old look like for you? There are so many different ways to be. There are so many different ways to impact the world right now. It is really limitless. I'm seeing that more and more and more as I continue to walk this journey. Let me tell you, it is limitless. If you dream it, you can do it. It might take a long time and you might have to let go of a lot of things, but you can. And I feel like that's what the world needs from us more than anything. I believe that the world needs me in my joy. The world needs me in my bliss. The world needs me to be creating the world that I actually want to live in. I believe that's the biggest impact that I can make and the biggest way that I can have an impact. So take a breath, ground, get outside, take some time to zoom out, sit with the forest, give yourself permission to relax a little bit, and permission to redefine and re-explore what it means to be a change maker along your journey. All right, those are my thoughts for now. Again, this is an ongoing conversation, one that we will keep coming back to on this channel again and again, because it's something I think about a lot. I want all of us to be able to do this sustainably. Sending love to you on your journey, and see you next time.